Everyone. Welcome to our today's webinar, and I thank you all for your participation. So, in this webinar, we are going to talk about the misconfigurations in Active Directory's perspective that could prove to be costly for any organization. So, misconfigurations in IT systems, particularly within critical components like Active Directory, can have far-reaching consequences for organizational security and stability. So to combat these risks effectively, it's essential to delve into the intricate anatomy of misconfiguration, like dissecting their underlying causes and manifestations. So when we talk about misconfiguration, we are going to talk about the deviations from recommended or intended settings within Active Directory environment. So there are certain common misconfigurations that raises an alarm for various organizations. So if you have inappropriate access control settings, imagine the level of impact this misconfiguration could cause. This could lead to overprivileged or underprivileged user accounts, groups, or objects within Active Directory. So also, there are various other misconfigurations like incorrectly configured group policy objects, which can result in inconsistent security settings, software deployment failures, or even any uninformed restrictions as well. So misconfiguration on authentication protocols such as Kerberos or NTLM can expose vulnerabilities to credential-based attacks or unauthorized access. And also, when we talk about authentication, we will have to talk about DNS configurations as well, because improper domain name system configuration can disrupt the Active Directory's functionality, leading to authentication failures, replication issues, or domain, or even the domain controller may become unavailable. And there are certain underlying factors contributing to misconfiguration. So one such thing is the complexity of the Active Directory. So the inherent complexity of Active Directory with multiple components, objects, and dependencies increases the likelihood of misconfigurations occurring, especially in large scale environments where resources are managed in large numbers. So basically, when the level of complexity is high, we humans tend to make mistakes stemming from insufficient training, oversight, or adherence to best practices. And often these contributes to misconfigurations during deployment, maintenance, or also during the troubleshooting task. In many cases, misconfigurations in Active Directory can be traced back to deficiencies in change management practices. Now, inadequate change management process such as undocumented changes, lack of testing procedures, or unapproved modifications can introduce misconfigurations indefinitely. So, accumulate also an accumulated technical debt and legacy configurations inherited from previous administrators or outdated practices can create fertile ground for misconfigurations to thrive. Now, because of the misconfigurations in Active Directory and improper security practices, a child hospital in Chicago was under a ransomware attack. So this happened in February this year when the cyber attack forced the healthcare provider to take its IT systems offline and postpone medical care in some cases. And even email, phones, access to MyChat, and on-prem internet were all impacted. Ultrasound and CT scan results were rendered unavailable. Patient service prioritization system were taken down, and doctors were forced to switch to pen and paper for prescriptions. Now, this attack was carried out by a hacker group named Reseda. The kind of attack was a ransomware attack. So the ransomware gang has listed Lori Children's on its extortion portal on the dark web, claiming to have stolen 600 GB of data from the hospital. So this ransomware group now offers to sell the stolen data for 60 bitcoins to a single buyer. So this is what they have listed in the dark web. So the price for the data was given as 60 bitcoins, which is equivalent to 3.7 million US dollars to a single buyer. And also you can see the deadline was set to 7 days, after which the data will either be sold to multiple threat actors at a lower price or even leaked for free on Reseda's platform. On 7th March 2024, Reseda Group claimed that they have sold the data for $3.4 million, and this was also updated in the dark web saying all data was sold. So, nevertheless, it took more than 45 days for the attack victim to get all its systems back online. So there are many such attacks that surfaced in the last year, and one such incident is the cities of Dallas, Texas, and Oakland in California city services attack. They both have been working for months to recover from cyber attacks that affected city services. So this attack exposed the personal information of almost 100,000 people's personal information. Also in July 2023, the Bath Health NHS Trust in London was the victim of ransomware attack that exposed the personal data of around 2.5 million patients. So the attack was carried out by the Russian ransomware gang Black Cat, who's also known as Alpha V, which has a history of targeting healthcare providers. So Black Cat claims to have stolen 70 TB of data, including CVs, financial reports, and internal hospital information. And there was one more attack which hackers also carried out. And this attack was against the school districts, including Minnesota, Colorado, and California. So students' personal information, social security numbers, and psychological reports were all stolen. And since the school district refused to pay the ransom, hackers group posted the stolen data to the hackers group Telegram account, and which obviously lets multiple users to download the data for free. Now, not only that, hackers also targeted SolarWinds, a software company, by deploying malicious code into its IT monitoring and management software, which is used by thousands of enterprises and government agencies worldwide. It was believed that the Russian operatives were behind this, and the hackers group was known as Cozy Bear. The attack was a supply chain attack, and at least 18,000 companies likely downloaded the malicious update, resulting to annual revenue loss ranging between 8% to 14% for each organization. Um, Also, Dish Network, which is a satellite broadcast provider. Now, Dish Network confirmed that ransomware attack was the cause of multi-day network and service outages, and in this instance, attackers compromised the company's domain controller and then encrypting VMware ESXi servers and backups. So it after this attack, it almost took 3 months for Dish Network to bring all its system back online, and also confirmed that the attack has impacted over 296,000 individuals. Now, Dish Network also confirmed that the stolen data has been deleted by the hackers, which suggests that Dish Network could have paid a ransom to the cyber criminals. So Microsoft AD competes with 179 other competitor tools and holds 54% market share in identity and access management category. And so with all the cyber attacks that are happening and the market share that the Active Directory has, 53% of the attacks are happening by compromising the Active Directory. And out of these attacks, 72% of the attacks are happening due to misconfigurations. So let's talk about few misconfigurations that could prove to be costly. And one such thing is NTFRS sysvol replication. So what is NTFRS? It is an old protocol that has been replaced by DFSR. So attackers can manipulate the NTFRS vulnerabilities to compromise sysvol folder and potentially change GPOs and logon scripts to propagate malware and move laterally across the environment. Now, what is the sysvol? Sysvol is a special directory that resides on each domain controller within a domain. Now, the directory comprises folders that store group policy objects and logon scripts that clients need to access and synchronize between the domain controllers. So, for these logon scripts and GPOs to function properly, sysvol should be copied accurately and rapidly throughout the domain. So, this process, referenced as sysvol replication, ensures the identical duplication of relevant policies of a domain to another domain controller in the domain. So how does this sysvol replication occur? So initially with Windows 2000 server, replication was handled by the FRS protocol. And later, FRS replaced the LAN manager replication service of Windows NT server. So, however, Microsoft deprecated FRS in Windows Server 2008. So, in its place, the distributed file system protocol now manages the sysvol replication. So DFSR, which improves replication performance, reliability, and cybersecurity. So what's the problem? Despite being replaced with the newer, better functioning DFSR, FRS is still widely used, especially in domains that had a Windows Server 2003 domain controller at any point. But because it is deprecated, FRS no longer receives any bugs or security fixes that could spell big trouble for environments where FRS is still hanging around. Continued use of an old protocol interfacing with these are risky. Potentially, as said earlier, attackers can manipulate this NTFRS vulnerabilities to compromise sysvol and change GPOs or logon scripts to propagate malware. So how do you know that what replication protocol is being used on your registry? So on your registry editor, locate this particular subkey and check the subkey value, and the value of 3 indicates that DFSR is in use. A different value or missing subkey indicates that FRS is still in use. And if you find FRS in use on a domain controller, migrate to DFSR and disable FRS as soon as possible. The migration process will upgrade the replication process, uh, uh, which will also correct related health issues in your environment. So let's see where exactly and how exactly the subkey looks like in your domain controller's registry editor. So to do that, log into your domain controller. So this is my root domain controller for my test environment. That it's taking some time. Here we go. We will wait for the domain controller to boot up, and once it's done, open your let's open the registry editor and we'll locate that particular key. All right, so here it is. So on the registry editor, look out for HT local mission, and under local mission, navigate to system. Under system, navigate to current control set, and under current control set, expand the services folder, and inside the services folder, look out for DFSR and parameters. Expand the sysvol, and on the sysvol, you'll find migrating sysvols, and here you can see the local state and the data and the value is set to 3. So as I said, if the value is set to 3, DFSR uh, is in use, and if there is no value or if the subkey is missing, that indicates that FRS is still in use. All right, so now we know where to look at this replication and which protocol it's being used, and what happens if this particular protocol is running on an old version. So the next misconfiguration we are going to talk about is delegation changes to domain naming context head. So changes in the delegation to this special object could enable unprivileged users to synchronize the Active Directory database for offline cracking, which is nothing but a DC sync attack. So what is the domain naming context head is each Active Directory domain has a domain naming context which contains domain specific data. So the root of this NC is represented by a domain's distinguished name, DN, and is typically referred to as the naming context head. For example, when my domain name is manage engine, my distinguished name or the naming context head would be DC is equal to manage engine, comma DC is equal to com. And each domain controller in the domain replicates a copy of the domain naming context. And what is a DC sync attack and how it happens? So DC sync attack is a method that bad actors can use to impersonate DC by leveraging the directory replication services remote protocol to request password data from a targeted domain controller. By design, DRS remote protocol enables efficient synchronization of directory services, objects, and their attributes across all domain controllers in an AD forest. However, attackers can weaponize this functionality to gain uh, unauthorized access to user credentials and potentially escalate their privileges within the network. So although this functionality is fundamental to the proper replication of an AD environment, only a limited number of security principles should have the necessary rights to perform these actions. Unfortunately, misconfigurations or lack of awareness can lead to the assignment of these rights to non-default security principles, creating a potential security risk. So by default, specific rights are granted through the replication directory changes, and uh, replicating the directory changes all extended rights within AD. So these rights permit a security principle to replicate directory objects and their attributes, including sensitive password data from one DC to another. Although these rights are necessary for legitimate replication purposes, malicious actors can uh, exploit the right to perform DC sync attacks, exfiltrating password hashes and other sensitive information from the DC. So the impact of such an attack can be severe, and DC attacks can enable attackers to impersonate legitimate users, escalate privileges, and move laterally within the network. In worst case scenarios, the attackers gain domain administrator privileges and take complete control of the AD infrastructure. So, not to mention, there are many tools like Mimikat, Impactkit, and PowerShell Empire, which facilitate hackers to perform these kinds of attacks. So, by default, these rights are assigned assigned to a limited number of security principles, including domain admins, enterprise admins, administrators, domain controllers, and read-only domain controllers. So these security principles are usually trusted and have the necessary privileges to perform directory replication tasks within the domain. So the risk arises when non-default security principles are granted replication rights. So providing an opportunity, so this will provide an opportunity for attackers to exploit this feature. So what you'll have to do is look out for the accounts that are delegated the following rights for replicating directory changes, or replicating directory changes in filtered sets, and also determine whether DC sync is being used to host other DCs, and determine whether any accounts that are members of domain admins that are not required to be members of domain admins or domain controllers have these rights. So how do you check this? So to do this on the domain controller, log into your domain controller and on the server manager, open Active Directory users and computers. When you right click on your domain and go to properties, on the security, you can see the list of group or usernames added which has access to this particular domain. And the permissions that you'll have to look for is replicating directory changes. So these three permissions is what is important. So if you see for when you select everyone, it is not been allowed. And if you look for domain admins, you can see the permissions are allowed. For enterprise admins, it is allowed. So certain security principles have these permissions enabled. So once you see or once you set permissions to limited and right number of users, uh, so once you do it, the next thing to do is you'll have to detect these kinds of attacks. So to do that, we will need to enable few logs on the domain controller before emulating the attack. So to the logs such as logon events, audit logon events. So to capture and audit the logon events, open your group policy management console, expand the domain object, and expand the group policy object. Right click on default domain policy and click on edit. And now on the computer configuration, under policies, under Windows settings, under security settings, expand the advanced audit policy configuration and expand the audit policies. So over here, you can see log on or log off. So, and by default, the audit logon is not configured. So double click on this, check this box and check success and failure. And when you hit apply and hit OK, this will capture and audit all the logon events. And there is one more log that has to be enabled, and it's again on the group policy management console. And this particular log is in DS access audit directory service access. Yeah. So the same way, enable this and enable check both the boxes success and failure. Then hit apply and OK, and this will capture the uh, audit events for directory access. Okay, so once the logs are enabled and once these logs are enabled and once you have set the right delegation for the right users, uh, with the help of these logs and right auditing tools, it is possible to detect these DC sync attacks. So that's it about what could happen if there is a misconfiguration in delegation of domain naming context head. And there are few other misconfigurations that has to be looked upon for better and secure area environment. And one such misconfiguration is enabling Prince Pooler service on a domain controller. So several critical flaws have been found in Windows Prince Pooler services. So these flaws directly affect Prince Poolers that are installed on domain controllers, enabling remote code execution. So Prince Pooler is a Windows service which is enabled by default in all Windows clients and servers. The service manages print jobs by loading printer drivers, uh, receiving files to be printed, queuing them, scheduling, and so on. So the print spooler service is required when a computer is physically connected to a printer that provides printing services to additional computers on the network. Um, it is it is also possible to use third-party drivers and software, but many organizations rely on the default print spooler service. So on domain controllers, print spoolers are mainly used for printer pruning, which enables in removing printers that have been published to Active Directory and that are no longer available on the network. So printer pruning is especially important in larger environments with many printers uh, as it's helpful in cleaning up the printer list available to the domain users. So for this approach to work, though an appropriate group policy must be in place, from a security perspective, the Windows print spooler and printers in general have been a juicy target for exploitation by attackers for many years. So in 2010, Stuxnet worm, which was used against Iranian nuclear facilities, exploited a vulnerability in the service to escalate privileges and propagate malware across the network. So the same principle of vulnerability had resurfaced in 2020 when researchers uncovered new ways to exploit it. So it is still recommended to disable the print spooler where they are not required. You can disable the print spooler service across all your domain controllers or any machine for that matter by using the group policy setting. So domain controllers should never be used as print servers. The only legitimate reason that I know of to have a print spooler running on a domain controller is for printer pruning mentioned above. So in addition to the numerous vulnerabilities in Windows Print Spooler, an attack vector against this service known as the printer bug enables an attacker who can compromise a resource with Kerberos unconstrained delegation to also compromise the DC with system privileges. So it's better we disable this service, and let me show you where this particular service has to be disabled. So to do that, again, we'll go back to my root domain controller. And on the GPU, on the default domain policy, under computer configuration, click on the policies and go to Windows settings and travel to security settings. So under security settings, look out for system services. And once you expand it, look for print spooler service. Here it is. So here you can see it's disabled by default, but you can always define this. I've disabled this. So you can always define this policy over here. And once you set it to automatic or manual, so depending on the setting and depending on the group or OU that you link this group policy object to, the changes will take effect, but it is always recommended to have this print spooler service in a disabled mode. So like apply and hit OK. And once you like link it and enforce it, the group policy will take changes. So far in this webinar, we have discussed on the common misconfigurations, underlying factors of misconfiguration, some recent attacks because of misconfigurations. Also, among the lots of among lots of settings that could go wrong during configuration, we have discussed in detail on 3 misconfigurations that could prove to be costly. So if you have any questions or for any further clarification of the topic that has been discussed today, kindly reach out to my email address, pratish.d@zohocorp.com, which is shown on the screen as well. You can take a note of it. And also stay tuned for future webinars and events on such topics. So until next time, stay safe and secure. Thank you.